Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are and whenever you are. Welcome to Creator Toolbox. This is the show that helps you put tools into your toolbox to be a better ServiceNow, I'll get this out, ServiceNow developer or administrator. The wonders of live streaming. There's no redo. My name is Chuck Tomasi, Senior Developer Advocate at ServiceNow. Let's do some intros. Going that way to Earl.
Hi, everyone. I am Earl Duque. I am a ServiceNow developer advocate, and I've been with the team for about a year now. And before that, I was in a lot of higher ed customers doing development work. And I'll kick it off to Scott.
Hey, everyone. My name is Scott Kaufmann. I'm a product manager in platform security. So I'm actually the product manager of data filtration. I've been with ServiceNow for 9 years, going on 9 years, and at a customer for 8 more years before that. So I'm very familiar.
Awesome. And I'm Laura McVanaman. It's nice to meet y'all. I am the newest member of the Developer Advocate team, and I've worked at ServiceNow. I just had my 5-year anniversary, so very excited to still be here and very excited to hear about data filtration today.
And I didn't do much of an intro for me, but I've been here since mid-2010 at ServiceNow, as a customer for a couple of years before that, and a long resume of erroneous information before that. But enough about us. Thank you for joining. We are going to be talking about data filtration, one of the new features in Tokyo. Not just talking about it, but demonstrating it as well. I've built out a scenario, but I want to frame this up of what data filtration is. It's a way to provide a declarative way to protect high value data, because in many of the high security environments, finance, federal, that kind of thing, the auditors don't allow scripting, and they weren't really living up to their regulatory requirements, and they were getting some compliance issues. So this is our way to help address that. It provides not only access to the data, like an ACL, but it also provides access to what we call the subject criteria, or the user's environment, whether that's the IP address or what groups you belong to, which obviously helps reduce scripting. Now, data filtration complements ACLs. It runs before the ACLs. So you have to pass a data filtration rule, if it's there, before you get to all the other ACL checks. Now, whereas ACLs are an allow operation, and Scott's going to correct me if I'm saying anything out of order here. This is why he's here, to make sure that we're saying what we really heard in our appropriate training. ACLs are a grant base. You allow access to something. Data filtration works in reverse. It's a deny. It still has a condition part that you need to correct, and we'll show this to you in the demo. It has to be true to pass, and then you get the filter, almost like a funnel, if you will. What I miss? These are post-query operations like ACLs. One of the questions
before ACLs, but after, still post-query.
Before ACLs, but before query business rules. Yes. Wow, there's a whole lineup of things we got to keep track of now. We do have something on the roadmap that we'll share for later of where we're headed with that. One of the questions in Tech Now was, does this get rid of that annoying message at the bottom of the screen that says, so many records removed due to security constraints? The answer is no. We will still see that in the demo that we've got here. I skipped ahead on my notes. Quick reminders, and I'll get this in the demo as well, but it does require the security admin role, just like ACLs. You are configuring security rules of who can see what, so you do need that elevated security. There is no admin override. We'll also see that, because my Chuck Tomasi account on this particular PDI, it has admin access. But you're going to see these data filtration rules apply to my account because I don't satisfy some of the conditions that we've set up. It's also at the table level, or at the record level. You can't get granular down to the fields. So you're filtering out or filtering those records before that. And if you are creating these, just like ACLs, it does respect scopes. So if you're creating them, put them in a scope. And you'll notice on ours, we will be doing this in a scoped app. The table list is filtered to just those scoped apps. So if I'm configuring a data filtration rule for my app, my scoped app, I don't have access to things like sysuser or sysuser group or task or CMDB CI. You won't see those. It is specific to my application. Any further notes, Earl?
A clarification: security admin is required to do create, update, and deletion of records, but with admin you can still read records.
You can read, correct. Same basic outline as ACLs. Turning to Mr. Wizard, Scott, any words before we jump into our story here?
Yeah, I think I'll kind of, one of the things to understand is kind of the order of operations when it comes to accessing data. I think I'll touch on a few of the high level points. There's a whole lot of nuances that go on in each step, but once you get past the authentication point, the step that we go through to determine you are who you say you are, then you go and you say, I want to see this data. Let's just say I want to see all incidents. So there's a series of things that happen. There's some pre-query activities. What most people are familiar with is before query business rules or query business rules, however you want to call them. And then there's a lot of database stuff happening behind the scenes. One of the things, and this kind of goes into explaining a little bit more about the security constraints error and why we see these things in security that's happening after the query. If you say I want to see all incidents, and there's 1 million records in that table, we fetch all 1 million records. And because of some efficiency requirements, we actually paginate. We do total record count calculations. We do pagination calculations, because those are all very resource intensive activities, and the database does those really well. If you did it after the database, it would be a lot slower and performance would be not anywhere near where it is now. So you imagine we have these 1 million records that we've paginated now. We've done some pagination calculations. Then we get handed off to other things like access handlers and whatnot. Now we have data filters coming into play. So we're evaluating the data. We're evaluating who you are and making a determination of whether you're allowed to see certain data, subset of data, or all that data in that 1 million records. And then we hand it off to ACLs. So within that order, there's some artifacts as a result of that. Some of the benefits is, for example, you mentioned data filters runs before an ACL. The value there is because ACLs are an allow model, it's a bunch of ORs. If you have 10 ACLs that determine some some scope of data access, and then 11th one can come along and give access to more than the previous 10 has already gives you access to. It's a downside of something that makes ACL so great, unfortunately. But it causes some headaches for people that are trying to really secure high value data. So data filters is kind of designed to target high value data and know that there's no ACL afterward that's going to come along and give access to it, because what's been handed to ACLs is that has already been removed. So there's nothing to add anymore. We're trying to prove upon this as well. So that ordering, data filters happening after the query, but before ACLs, we actually our focus is on getting data filters to happen before the query. So we've built a query augmenter. So the notion of taking a query that goes before it goes to the database, we actually can intercept it now, and we can decorate it with conditions and do that very performantly. We are running into some challenges that kind of slow that process, but that's kind of the direction we're headed. And ultimately what happens then is that chunking, the pagination of those 1 million records, if data filters and ACLs starts removing things after the query, that pagination becomes inaccurate. And that's where you get the security constraints error and the pages, unfortunately, that have numbers that vary if there's been records filtered out. By moving data filters before the query, we are now removing data before that pagination process occurs. So if you're only supposed to see 100,000 of the 1 million records, there's only going to be a pagination on the 100,000 records, not the 1 million records that eventually goes to ACLs. So that kind of gives you some insight into kind of the whole, life cycle of, accessing data and the order of things, and, what artifacts, are a result of that and what we're trying to change.
Do we know when that would be expected, the moving data filtration to before query?
We don't.
Okay.
We're so with data filters, we actually are touching on an area that we haven't needed to touch in I don't know how long. I mean, we're creating a new data
Right.
control. Like
Yeah.
ACLs existed since the beginning of time, and so we're uncovering some areas where we can make improvements on that we didn't need to before. We're discovering some new things about the platform that we can change to make improvements everywhere, as because we're understanding these operations that are happening and where the bottlenecks are. But we're looking at probably 2 releases before we can really crack that problem.
I know a lot of people will be excited when that comes out, especially, I mean, you and me, writing before query business rules are not fun.
No. Yeah.
The scripting gets really complicated, and it adversely affects the rest of the platform, like
Right.
exporting
And they're
reports,
100%
you'll see it.
scripted, which is another problem.
I think the key word for data filtration is that it's declarative, and that's why regulatory auditors are accept declarative statements, because it's so much easier to build when it's easy to describe, kind of thing. And expected, and there's no one-offs from the script or something like that. I'll be excited when that comes out too. I'm glad that
Go ahead.
The key design criteria was, machine enforceable and human readable. That's just kind of the basis of any sort of security that is fully auditable. And today with ACLs, that's not the case.
Yeah, and anytime you've got a declarative option versus a scripted option, take the declarative one. It really reduces that technical debt, and your future self and your people who come after you will thank you for it. I don't know how many times I've walked into someone else's application or integration or situation and going, this is a lot of script to unwind, as opposed to going into some records and say, I can read this condition. It's very easy to figure out.
I'll point out in some areas when we kind of get into the demo, why declarative is great, and we can and where we'll start expanding and where we're focused on expanding to kind of accommodate more capabilities.
Yeah.
But you'll see why using data filters now is still advantageous, because you'll start inheriting some new stuff as we bring it along.
Well, good segue. What do you say we do a quick screen share, Earl? I'm going to bring up my scenario. I can't see you guys, so you got to tell me when it's ready.
It's ready.
Okay. We've got 3 personas that we're going to be using. Abel Tudor, he's our regional director. I've created an application to control stores. There are 800 and what did we say, 31 records in here.
Right.
So we've got some demo data that we can work with in various regions, various countries. Each has an ID. We've got some rules that we want to apply for various sections of these IDs, like the lowest 1,000 from 1,000 to 1999 is special and secure. We're going to put some data filtration rules around that. And notice that Abel and Dennis don't have any roles. This is a situation you may run into. I've got groups, but the groups don't necessarily have a role attached to them. Don't ask me what that means for licensing. I'm not going to even try to comprehend it, let alone answer it today. If you want to know more about licensing, my standard disclaimer applies. Go talk to your account manager, and they can help you. Now, I have no groups, but I do have the admin role. Kids, don't do this at home. Always assign roles through groups. This was only done for demo purposes. So let's take a look at this. Here's my list of store, 813. I transposed 2 numbers, sorry. 813 records. Some are active, some aren't. They all have an ID. They're in various countries. There's even some additional information inside the record that has, an IP address. I don't know what even that means, but and a code. Maybe that's some sort of backdoor hacker security code. Demo data, random demo data. It's not significant to anything. But this will help us tell our story. So in our first scenario, let me just also show you that I have Dennis's record here. Dennis is logged in. He sees the same 813, and Obel also has the same 813. We can see that down in the bottom. Okay, nothing special going on. The ACLs at this point are pretty much wide open. You can read if you have public access. So that goes back to what Scott was saying, that no ACL will grant you access that a data filtration rule has already taken out. And we'll see that in a second. Now, the first scenario is this first 1,000. You see, they're red, they're red, they're red, and then they stop being red. Okay, that means something to somebody. And according to the requirement I got is admins should only be able to see those records. They're special in some way. I don't know what that is, but only people with the admin role should see these. And yes, you could secure this with an ACL, but we're here to show you data filtration rules. And then I'll show you, some of the things you can do easily with data filtration that you can't do with an ACL as easily or without script. So let's start by going to, should also mention we did enable a plugin called Data Filtration. I thought it would, Scott, correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought that was on by default for new instances, or was it upgrades?
No, it's in Tokyo. We made the decision to not make it on by default.
Okay.
We wanted people to opt into it because of this. It's kind of an MVP product at this point.
Oh, sure. Great way to put it too. I love that. So you do have to turn it on if you choose. This is a great place to do it on your personal developer instance. Go to developer.servicenow.com and get yourself a free PDI. And then you can use it as a sandbox before you start exploring this in your sub-prod and prod instances in your organization. So once you have it turned on, you will see the data filtration menu, which has data filtration records. That's where we're going to be defining our rules. We've also got 3 more here: IP filter criteria, role filter criteria, and group filter criteria. We'll explore that in a little bit, but these allow you to create more involved and reusable components to the data filtration records. Is that a fair assessment, Scott?
Yeah.
And then finally, you can use a combination of these as a subject criteria. And interestingly enough, I discovered that subject criteria uses decision tables underneath. Like, yay, you go to edit a certain part, and like the decision builder pops up. That was kind of fun. Table exclusions is exactly what it sounds like. It says, I am not going to let you see or modify or do anything with these tables. You can add to these tables if you like. So back to data filtration records. Let's create a new one. What's the first thing I need to do, Earl?
Remember, you must have security admin, so we got to escalate yourself.
Yes. And hopefully
elevate yourself, not escalate.
We won't turn this into a drinking game. How many times does Chuck forget? There we go. Now I have a new button. If you don't see the new button, you don't have security admin. That's your clue. So rule number 1, pick your table.
And it will happen to everyone.
It will happen. It happens to everybody anyway for ACLs. Notice that I only have one table. If you are going, where are my other tables? If you say show, notice that we have a table choice script that does what it's supposed to. It says, this is what I'm going to show you in this table field. So I'm going to pick my store table, and it is active, just like most records in the system. You can still keep it, just make it deactive. Try not to delete things. Cascading means if you set one of these data filtration rules on a parent class, such as task, this will apply to all the records in the extended tables: incident, change, problem. I use that one because it's easier than going through several CMDB examples. Let's give it a nice, friendly description. Special low numbers for admins only. Scott, I also discovered that description is only 40 characters. So it's not even a short description. It's a shorter description.
Oh, wow. Okay.
We might want to look at that. I think that's in a couple of places. It might be on the subject criteria as well. All
Chuck
right.
and I had a lot of fun going through everything.
We discovered lots of stuff. This is, patch 0. This is the first release of the MVP. Okay, we've got data filter. These are the two important sections here, data filter and subject condition. If it were me designing this form, I probably would have reversed these because I tend to think of them in the reverse order, like if this, then that. But you do what you want to do.
I think that the idea here was we wanted to continue some familiarity with ACLs, which is really focused on the data first.
Ah, okay. I can
Okay.
stand behind that
You
logic.
might see some design, user experience changes around this because we are very concerned about fragmentation of features.
Yep.
So there is some consolidation on the horizon here as well.
Nice. So let's do our condition here. We want to only show where the ID is between. This is something you definitely would have to script for in an ACL. 1000 and 1999. Okay, easy enough. I'm getting a little concerned, so I save off and save early. That's what I want to show if you meet these conditions.
Before
Now,
you
here's-
jump to that, go back to the data filter.
Absolutely.
Two things here. One is that going back to the cascading as it relates to the conditions. So if you're on the task table, for example, and you want to cascade this down to all table extensions, it's important to understand that the conditions available to you are only on the table that you selected. So you're not going to see incident-specific conditions, even though you're cascading this down into potentially into the incident table. So the IDs are of the table you selected in the actual table field.
Good point.
So if you do need to have an incident-specific field as part of your condition, you'd need to create a data filter at the incident table level.
I see. The drop-down doesn't have the extended fields option then, I'm assuming.
Right. It has show related fields, even though, oh, no, I guess it doesn't on this one.
Yeah, just on different interfaces, it's the show extended fields to be able to do that additionally. But in data filtration, you would want to build it in a different record.
Yeah, so like cascading, in order to do that, it would have to collect all the fields across all the tables, and then you start causing potential issues where an incident-specific field is not in the task table. And so how does it interpret that and enforce it properly?
The whole point is trying to be declarative, and if you have a billion filters on one data filtration, maybe you need to relook at how you do data.
Possibly, yeah. The other thing to point out is similar to ACLs that we have that preview button next to data condition. And that's an easy way to see what records match the criteria. And then also it will allow you to click on the actual record match count and preview those records.
I was wondering, okay, condition builder equals V2 attribute is what puts up the nice preview button instead of the little circly thing. Gotcha.
Yeah.
All right. You
nice.
warm my
nice
heart
to
with
have.
condition fields when you use these three. Thank you. So many times we've created condition fields without readable equals true, and I'm so annoyed when I see encoded queries in a list.
So now you can actually see the records themselves by clicking on it. It's just like ACLs, but that's also
I mean, if we do that, you'll see right there. There's our data condition. It actually reads instead of this encoded query. Let's go back in there and set our subject condition. So step 2 is, what do I need in order to see that? According to what I said before, the user needs to have the admin role. So I use the chooser here again, and I've got the ability to look at network criteria. Could be something I've built, or could be, no, that has to be something I built in that network criteria list, or group, or role, or subject criteria. Subject criteria, subject group, and subject role apply to what I am. I am the subject in this. So let's make it easy and say subject role is admin. Easy enough. This is now live. What do you say we go look? Favorites, ungrouped stores. I am admin. I see everything below 1000. Hooray, there's 2006 at the bottom of the list.
Below 2000.
Below 2,000, thank you. In the 1,000. If it starts with a 1, I win. Now, let's refresh Dennis's list. And, haha, can't see those. And he starts counting at 2006. And then from there on, it's pretty much what you would expect.
That was
So,
a lot. Honestly, that's a lot easier to configure than an ACL.
and OBBLE should be the same way, right? Minus 50, minus 48, there's the other two. Yeah, that wasn't too bad, pretty straightforward. What do you say we do another one? Okay, I have another requirement. Only show these AMS records, like this one, if you are in the AMS support group. Okay. Again, you would have to resort to scripting with an ACL for something like this. We're going to do it, of course, with data filtration. So I have a favorite for my rules. Let's create a new one, again, on the store table.
Well, dynamic filters would be able to do it in the condition builder for an ACL.
Yes, you could. You're right. You're right. So our data filter is going to be if the support group is store AMS support, that's what I'm going to show you, and that would give me 19 records, or take away 19 records from my list. And the subject condition is going to be, this time, subject group is store AMS support. Now, I did hear a question on another video that said, can I do show me all of my groups? And this is not a dynamic filter. It just has an is operator. And this does have a dynamic filter, which you could do here. So I'd be saying, if I was in the AMS group, show me all of the records for all of my groups, which might be a little too broad. So you got to think closely about that, recognizing that, let's go back to my original one, just because we'll stay on script. This doesn't have any more conditions for the groups than just is. There isn't is one of or is dynamic yet, should I say, Scott?
Yeah, possibly. Let me touch on that for sure. It's something to kind of peel apart a little bit and understand. So you have to imagine that we are building something that is potentially being called in every transaction. As you add more data filters. So we're talking about high transaction part of the system. When we start adding the is dynamic, right? It's basically mini JavaScript call.
Yep.
There is an extra operation from the subject side. So if you think about it from a query standpoint, so our goal is trying to get this to be done before the query. As far as the dynamic variables for data, that's basically translated into a modified SQL query. In order to determine whether or not you satisfy the criteria, the subject conditions, if we started adding dynamic capabilities, we would actually be running scripts and potentially database calls before we did our main database call. So we're adding extra steps and expensive steps. So we have to be careful in how we evaluate you as a person to determine your level of access. If we touch on kind of the area that we're going to be going more on, and I can go into this a little bit later when it makes more sense, but the subject conditions are going to grow. We just maintain some parity, role, group, and IP address. And actually, if any of you are familiar with adaptive authentication, which is also something fairly new to us, we're sharing the same code. So the same rules that you define to determine authentication, adaptive authentication rules, you can carry that over into your data conditions as well.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so we plan on getting more into the subject and environment attributes and allow for kind of customization and configurability of that. And I can talk about that in a little bit if we want to. But that's where we want to grow beyond just role, group, and network. Adding network is actually a great thing because that doesn't exist today in the ACL. So
Right.
that's key. That's this, we're sharing code. We're eventually going to bring all this all the way into the ACL as well. So a lot of the stuff, the declarative stuff, we're going to be adding to ACLs. And so, that's kind of where we're focused on growing.
All right. And am I safe to assume you can't do, JavaScript : something in here?
Well, there's a matter of if you can or you should, which I'm not sure which is valid, which is true.
Good answer. Good answer. Just because you can do a thing doesn't mean you should do a thing.
Right.
I wouldn't be married if that happened. Okay, do we see how it worked? So theoretically, Chuck is not part of AMS support group, according to that slide earlier. But if I look at stores ungrouped, and actually, you know what? I have a shortcut just for that. So group by support group, I don't have any AMS. Let's see what Dennis gets. By support group, Dennis is also not in. He's in the EMEA support group. And if we go over and look at our old friend Abel Tudor, not history. Hey, where's my favorites? Anyway. Group by support group, he does have AMS because he's in that group. So proof that we can easily create a data filtration record for that specific group. I have one more, but I want to show you something first. If you're ever questioning, why don't I see this? You can do debug all security. Brings up our favorite debugger window. I'm going to allow. And when I refresh this list, see if I can get that back. There we go. I can search on filter, right? And hit this and determine exactly which ones applied and which ones did not. So data filtration applied, subject criteria not met, support group, blah, blah, blah. Data filtration not applied, subject criteria met. The ID is between, so I can tell exactly why did this record show up or not is based on these records. So use the security debugging to your advantage.
Thank you for making sure that's included with its own messages, by the way.
Yeah.
You're welcome. we wanted to do better than we've done in the past.
Go ahead.
You're driving a good point, which is also going to be more meaningful in the future, right? So as we, you see right now that, I'm missing some data because I don't satisfy some criteria. And so that prompts you to, go into the debug. In the future, when we are able to move this at before the query, as part of the query, those notices will go away, and everyone will be seeing the data that they presumed are allowed to see. So even more so, the debugger is going to come into play as kind of like your go-to, rather than just seeing the error itself or the message itself saying, oh, okay, what's being hidden and why, and then go to the debugger.
Oh, good point. Good point. Okay, I'm going to do a different approach to that last example where I said the AMS support group gets to see the AMS records. We're going to satisfy Dennis so he can see, only Dennis can see the EMEA support records, but I'm going to do it in a slightly different way using something called support criteria. So underneath, what was I typing yesterday? TAF. I like working on the middle of the word for uniqueness. We're going to create a support criteria that we can then use in our data filtration record. This is a small example of where you can go with this. So we are going to create a new called, I like to just call these, I'm going to prefix this because AMS support or EMEA support is going to come in all over the place. And this will help me tell them apart. I am by no means condoning a best practice here. I only got confused yesterday, so maybe this turns into a best practice. Description. Hey, this description field is bigger. I like this. So save that. And down here, I've got 2 more tabs, and this is where I may lean on Scott a little bit to help us understand what the criteria inputs are.
So as you mentioned before, this is using decision tables. And so the prerequisite for decision tables is to define what inputs you want as part of that.
Okay.
So it's essentially just adding what criteria, what of the 3 that we're able to evaluate, what you want to add to this, and it's just kind of a nuance with using decision tables.
All right, and this is going to, these 3 correspond to these 3, correct? So it's going to be giving me records in these other tables implicitly.
Yeah, the other those other links in the menu are probably just extraneous. They're just there. You probably don't need to interact so much with those, but we kind of guide you through the process.
Oh, hardcore people love them.
True. That's probably why they're still there.
Now, I could create any one of those IP filter criteria to say, hey, I want this IP range or site or address or whatever. You can make these as simple or as complex as you want. This is a group filter criteria for EMEA support. Again, reusable components in here. And I'm going to assign it the group store EMEA support. That is that piece of it. And notice that it currently says used false. Now this is the cool part. These records know where they're referenced. So you can't delete the wrong thing first. If I came and tried to delete the support criteria, it would go, I'm sorry, if you try to create the group filter criteria, it would go, hang on, this is being used somewhere. You don't want to yank the carpet out from under this or saw the branch off that you're sitting on. Use whatever metaphor you like for disaster happened here. The system will actually tell you that. You can't delete this record because it's used in a subject criteria, which I think is really cool.
Though something I did notice is you can actually still set that field as active or false, even though it is automatically determined by the criteria conditions. So maybe in the future we can make that a read-only field.
Yeah, protect it.
Whoop. Yep, you're right. Good call, Earl. MVP product.
Yeah,
Okay.
and we want to do better in this area, make it a bit more intuitive, because I think we realize it's not, but that's just kind of how it has. The components are necessary. We want to do better though.
And Scott, if I add more criteria inputs, let's say I say you've got to be in this group on this IP range, et cetera, you have this role. Are those ANDed or ORed together?
That's defined in the condition. So all you're doing right now in this first tab is just bringing you're bringing all the available inputs that you want to evaluate in the condition.
Okay, so it's kind of like ATF in a way, where you're setting things up that you can use later, or Flow Designer if you will.
Yeah, so think of, in our condition builder, there's the left side and then the right side, right? So you're just basically creating the list of left options right now.
Well, let's go do that. Let's show these people how that works. So label, this is my subject criteria condition for EMEA support. You see why I'm starting to do that. And in here, oh, look, I've got the different filter criteria. Earl and I were wondering what sysid and keywords are doing in here.
That's a good question.
Okay.
More generic to the condition field? I don't know.
We were conjecturing about those two for a little bit last night.
No attributes on this one, so maybe if you use V2, they go away or something. I don't know. Yeah, so what we're asking is, when this decision table evaluates our decision, we want it to come back as true. Now, you could invert this, which says you are not part of that group. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Easy enough. Pretty straightforward.
Well, yes.
I love that. Yes, and
I'm doing mental gymnastics right now to verify that answer.
Okay. I mean, we can easily flip that and see who can see what records in a minute. But if you want to see the decision table, up comes Decision Builder, our old friend. Thank you, Julia Perlis and her team, for creating this. It's not that hard to glance at it and go, what's happening here? If you're part of this group, it's true. Okay, let's go back. I didn't make any changes. Let's go back again. Okay.
Show the first tab again.
First tab is now true. It says you have been used. So if I define 3 of these, and I like that. If you said, I've got a group one, and of course you can always personalize the list to say, what's the display name? What's the filter criteria? Blah, blah, blah. To make it a little more readable, you go, oh, my filter criteria for EMEA support is used, but I better go back to the criteria conditions because the one with the role or the one with the IP address wasn't included in that condition. So it gives you a little visual before hopping over here. Go, is this right? Let me open that up and see if it actually says what I want it to say.
So in the midst of all this, I think it's important not to lose context of what we're trying to achieve and the value of it. So if you think about creating a number of data filters that have some, let's just call them compound conditions. So you have to be a member of a couple different groups, or be it from this role or from the corporate network. And you want to repeat those compound conditions and have consistency across multiple data filters. This is how you would go about that. Almost liken it to building a persona that's using a combination of role, group, and network.
You
right?
stole my thunder, man. It's
I'm sorry.
reusability. Actually, it's your thunder. Have at it. You
That's a
guys
great way to
know
put it.
this. Yeah, the reusability, and I'll show you real quickly. Now that we've got the subject criteria defined, that persona that Scott alluded to, I'm going to go to back to data filtration and create a new filtration record to enact that or enroll that. Store, let's see, EMEA for EMEA port. Woo, it's like a protest statement or something. Data filtration, similar to before, we're going to say the support group is store EMEA. That's what you get to see if you satisfy this condition. Now, this is where subject criteria comes in. I'm going to use that other subject. Now, I have to start typing it. So fortunately, I started with an SC for subject criteria. And there we go. So in theory, if this worked, fingers crossed, I go to Chuck's list. Chuck is not in AMS or EMEA, so that's working. Dennis, Darren, I don't know, I keep calling him Dennis because it's Darren Ennis or Enos. Nice. Something. What's his name? Darren Nice. Okay. The answer is yes to EMEA, no to AMS. And if we go over to OBL and refresh the list, you can refresh the list just by clicking all. Aha! Things have been taken away. Nobody in the first 1,000 because that rule is applying. And group by support group says no EMEA. Should we flip it around just to test your theory, Scott?
Okay.
We're off script. Just letting everybody know.
Scott's like, we have a really good batting average. We don't want to change it up now.
Right.
No, we're
Back
developers.
into the criteria, and we flip this to false. So this would be a way to exclude data from people not in that group. Let's try it again. Favorites, grouped by support group. Chuck doesn't see it. Interesting. Refresh the list. I'm not sure what happened to my refresher here. Still don't see it for Dennis, and still don't see it here. Now, this is where we
there's a couple of things we could talk about now, Chuck, based off of what we found last night.
We're going to just try clearing the cache. Let's see what impact that has. We could also try logging out, logging in, but I'm not ready to go there yet. Okay, cache is cleared. Chuck refreshes. Does Chuck see records? We have to rebuild that cache, which is why this is taking a couple extra seconds. This is when you are glad you have a cache. No. I noticed another decoration. I don't know if this was San Diego or Tokyo, But you see up here where you got these new little icons here? You can see what is grouped by. So many times I've turned on grouping and I don't remember which column was on.
Totally.
This is nice. Thank you for whoever did that.
I think this
And
is a great time to mention some of the quirks that we ran into in
Yeah.
our testing, Chuck. So when we were figuring out and setting up this demo, some things came up where we realized two things. One, impersonation. The reason why Chuck is showing them in its own session windows right now instead of impersonating a user to demonstrate the records is because what we've noticed is that the essentially the criteria that is hitting for the data filtration persists to the original person that's logged in, even if you impersonate to somebody else. So impersonation is not a great thing to use while trying to test for these records in data filtration. So I see Scott writing things down, I think. So that's I see him on the side. The other thing is right now, Chuck is in a scoped application. And we saw some irregularities while being in a scoped application when it came to
the subject criteria.
Yeah, subject criteria specifically. So if we're running into interesting things here, we don't know necessarily if it's a scoped issue or if it's a bug for the actual feature itself. But when it comes to subject criteria, we knew that it worked in global, but not in a scoped application.
Yeah, for scoping, we can definitely do better in this area. We obviously, as you can tell, we support scopes, but then when you add like scoped administration or scoped security into the picture, it complicates it significantly. So we've identified some areas where we can definitely improve and have more expected behavior around that, and also kind of be better than what scopes allow us to do.
One more reminder is some of you may know if you use a glide record query, you can navigate around ACLs. And if I'm correct, you can do that today with glide record on data filtration, but you cannot do it. I mean, glide record secure honors the ACLs and the data filtration rules, but the goal is no more working around with glide record. They are what they are, and especially if they're pre-query, you got no choice.
Yeah, that's something good to kind of dive in a little bit on. As we kind of thought of data filters, charter is to kind of protect high value data. One of the things that we identified, an area that we identified that we wanted to try and improve upon was, for lack of a better term, kind of centralizing security. So taking the choice out of the hands of the developer of whether or not security is enforced or not. So we kind of took a position of let's not make data filters bypassable. That led us down a very long rabbit hole that ultimately was a dead end. Not because we can't solve the problem, but it wasn't data filters' job or responsibility to solve. What we ended up finding is a very high risk of regression. So if you think about it, all of our, what we ship out, in our baseline code, we have some expectations around what level of access certain processes have, and you can't get around the need for a process to be able to bypass security. The system itself needs access to data in order to process the data. So you have to have some level of, bypassability of that security. And today that mechanism is glide record versus glide record secure. And unfortunately, both of those APIs are publicly available as in script. So you can essentially create scripts that bypass security. This is nothing new. That's just the way it is. So the notion of trying to change the point where data filters was enforced, I mean, we wanted to go down to the DB query layer. But what we found is that we were creating an environment of a very high risk of regression. So like there's no data filters shipped out of the box, but suddenly you start creating, data filters and applications start misbehaving because they weren't tested, with security in place. Maybe that application needs full access to data, but you were creating a data filter that was removing access, and you'd start seeing anomalies. So we made a determination that we need to solve that problem more at the general platform layer rather than within data filters itself. So we've kind of resolved to reevaluating our approach to that problem.
One other quirk that we came up with is you can see Obel here doesn't have access to any of the 1,000 records. But if I were to drill into one of those records and say, email the link to Obel, away we go. Psst, there we go. Had to remind. So that's something to consider as well. I don't know if that's on the roadmap as well, Scott, but
yeah, we actually have a defect. We're working as a defect at the moment.
Good. So if you're watching this in the future and it doesn't work for you, you know why. All right, that's unless we wanted to go down the global path for a quick demo, I think we're looking at the clock. We better get it back on track. But we're aware of these features. This is patch 0. I got nothing else to demo here, Earl.
I think we can probably run through some of the questions that were asked inside of the chat during the demo and just make sure we covered everything.
Oh, wait, I do want to show one more thing. Hold on.
Okay.
Your filtration. If you try to delete that group criteria, I said it's got a smart delete, and I go, I'm going to be sneaky and try and delete it. It says, no, you can't. It's already being used. Click here to review, and it brings you right to where you need to go. Okay. Yes, let's answer some questions.
It's little things like that save a lot of headaches. Thanks for making sure that's there. Whoop.
Ooh, that was fun.
Give me a little warning first, Chuck. Dang.
Sorry. I could have fixed that too.
A few questions popped up in chat. A lot of these we did answer on air, just by coincidence, but I just want to make sure that we covered everything. Stefan had a question about data filtration and how we're expecting admins to be able to work on records that are being reported to us if there's no admin override button and stuff like that. And one of the key things is debug security still happens. So there's key messages in there saying, hey, data filtration is getting rid of this record for this person, for you. That's why you can't see it. And that's why there's a bug. So you need to go look at data filtration, or if it's not that, go to ACLs then. But one of the other things is one thing did we mention the URL bypass, Chuck?
Yes.
Okay.
I showed that when you went into the specific record.
Right. Okay. So there is stuff that we noticed about that it's mainly a table list kind of thing.
Known defect.
Yeah. We had a lot of questions for clarity about ACLs working with data filtration, and just for clarity, they work to complement each other. So remember, they're both post query. Data filtration works first and then passes those lists of records over to ACLs to run. So they work together, and they always work together. You can't have one or the other if you turn on data filtration. What else is in there? Another clarification about, does this get rid of the security prevented showing the rows? That's part of post query. So because data filtration is also post query, it doesn't get rid of that. What you're looking for is a before query business rule right now. But as Scott has mentioned, in the future, we hope to move data filtration or give the option to have that run before query, which would solve that problem also. Nitish gave a good summary of what happens, and then I clarified it with hey, it's more clear if you say where the query was, so that you know what happens before query and what happens after query, to be a good picture of the workflow that's happening on records behind. What else has been asked?
There was the one about cascading too.
Yeah, so earlier in the episode, we talked about cascading, and Scott gave great insight on gotchas to make sure to pay attention for, about the condition builder for a data filtration record, and to make sure to build if you have a cascading field that you need to be addressing, you would want to because of the declarative way of how this works, is to build a new data filtration record on that table. So a lot of cool clarifications, a lot of questions in the chat, which is great because we want to. That's how we get all the information out there, and how we get all the information to Scott too. This is great. This is why we love having a product manager on our shows. Yeah, I think that was a lot of the questions. A lot of the things. A lot of the chat was a lot of clarification on things that we did answer in the show. So I won't go over a lot of these questions again. But did you notice anything else in the chat, Lauren? Did you go through all your notes, Chuck?
Yep. Earl, point up with your left finger. This is part of the Tokyo content. You can tell because we have this cool badge. We are in the midst of the Tokyo season. You can find out everything that's out there or going to be out there on our Tokyo calendar. I think we may need to update a few links because it's been a couple of weeks now. We've got content rolling out, Creator Toolbox, Live Coding Happy Hour, Breakpoint podcasts, blog entries, lots of stuff coming in. devlink.sn/Tokyo. Earl's got the banner right there. We're on cue. Well-oiled machine. Any other announcements, Earl?
We have a. Do you want to talk about the AES challenge at all?
Build with AES challenge. Yes, Lauren.
Heck yeah. So I believe it was about 2 or 3 weeks ago, we kicked off the Build with AES challenge. All the information about the challenge is listed on our blog and also on the community. But essentially, if you can write a short blog post or film a short video on anything that you've built with AES, why you liked it, what you liked about the experience, we will send you a free shirt. It is very similar to the shirt that went like lickety split out of stock at CreatorCon. So if you missed out on the shirt there, this is an awesome opportunity to get a very good dupe without the little CreatorCon specific logo, but the whole shirt is the same.
All right, I'll be the one to ask, what does AES stand for?
App Engine Studio. Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
So, and I just want to make sure we say, just because Nitish asked about it, he's saying that if you have trouble with the dev links, just go to developer.servicenow.com and check out all of our resources on the blog, and you'll be able to see the Tokyo content, Breakpoint content, this show's content, our Friday live coding happy hour content. All of that's there on developer.servicenow.com, and then click on blog. Plus, you'll see all the other resources that you have available to you as a developer. So check it out.
All right, I just tested. We did have a technical issue last week because our IT people changed something on the back end that we had to track down. So it was broken for about 12 hours, but hopefully that's all cleared up. I just tested. devlink.sn/Tokyo is working, but you can also find that on the blog as well. Thank you, Earl. Thank you, Lauren, for joining. And definitely thank you, Scott, for the depth of knowledge on this product.
Absolutely. Thanks, guys.
Definitely another couple degrees higher than where we could have taken it. Had I had a little more time, I would have made nicer slides. Until next time, everybody take care, stay safe, and we will see you soon. Bye.